All right, we'll keep the hoops going here. Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer. What's up, man? Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Ryan. How are you doing today?
Good. So, when I was looking at the West, I felt like, are we going to have some defining tiers here where Denver, Memphis, and New Orleans are that first tier, all 2.5 games? And then there's that next group, Dallas. But then, when does that group end? And then when I look over at the East, it feels like the top teams are actually better. Philadelphia just keeps rolling along here too with a good point differential. I like Cleveland. Like the top 5 for the East feels pretty significant. But even if we looked at Boston's rough offensive stretch in December, try and figure out the Rob Williams part of it, it feels like from a health standpoint, they're the best bet. I may not think they're I'm not looking at Boston saying, hey, they're clearly the best team. And maybe I don't even feel as good about them today as I did the first, 25 games of the season. But from a health standpoint, knowing that their two guys play all the time, they seem like a better bet than the other contenders.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think they're top end guys with Tatum and Brown. Tatum, one of the 10 best players in all of the NBA. Jaylen Brown, one of the top 20, 25 best. And after that, too, I mean, there's certain teams where you lose one role player, it's dismantling to the system. With Boston, they have 8 of the top 100. In our Ringer rankings, we had 8 Celtics when we revealed the rankings last month. Right now, I think, White and Grant Williams fell off, but with Smart, Derek White, Al Horford, Malcolm Brogdon, Grant Williams, and obviously Robert Williams starting the other night for Boston. Once again, I mean, they have so much depth of talent as well, where even if one of those guys go down, they have other guys who can step up. So I think they're a safe bet in that sense, Ryan. I do think, though, compared to Milwaukee, though, if Milwaukee were to get Chris Middleton back and totally healthy, I'd still give a slight edge to the Bucks over the Celtics if I'm picking a finals team because of the greatness of Giannis, with how he works with, Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton. And we saw Joe Ingles the other night have an outstanding performance for them off the bench, showing the importance of their shot creation there around Giannis. But ultimately, Boston is the safer bet, considering health and all the issues some of those other teams are having.
So Durant's out a month. We all kind of expect it to happen at some point. Is there now enough depth, though, for them to kind of ride this out way better than they did last year?
I think so. I mean, Chris Vernon and I were talking about this week with Brooklyn. All of our conversations this year, it's about KD and the greatness of his play, but it's also about how all the pieces around him this year. Whereas last year it wasn't as much about Nick Claxton being an all defensive candidate. They recently get Harris and Curry back. Those guys can have an uptick. And I think the real important player for them without KD now is going to be TJ Warren. TJ Warren has been coming off their bench, occasionally staggering minutes between him and Kevin Durant. He's a guy who can be a bucket getter for you, who can score close to 20 points per game. So I think with Brooklyn, they have enough. It's like we just said with Boston. The Celtics have so much depth on their team that others can step up. With the Nets, obviously you're not going to be as good with Kevin Durant, a top 5 MVP candidate so far this season, an all-D candidate in his own right, obviously. But they do have other guys who can, I think, collectively absorb some of that responsibility and help keep the team afloat in the top 6 in the Eastern Conference. I don't think I don't expect them to fall apart. In fact, I'd be shocked if they were to fall apart.
What would it take for you to go, okay, I actually like Philadelphia better than everybody in the East? Is that possible?
I think for me to like them more than anybody in the Eastern Conference, it's going to have to be James Harden and Tyrese Maxey even getting better together in that backcourt. I think with Maxey, as good as he is, he's still that upside piece for them where if he can tap into an even higher level as that third cog on that team, because we've seen Harden have moments where he still can tap into the old Harden and be obviously still an MVP candidate, but can Maxey step up even further with the current roster? And if it's not that, perhaps it's a trade that Daryl Morey might have up his sleeve to add one more wing in that rotation to help elevate them. But I'm high on Philly as is, Ryan. I think they're right up there with Boston, Milwaukee with that group, with Embiid and Harden playing at the level that they are. I just think it's on that backcourt to further elevate their play up to the level of Embiid.
Yeah, I feel guilty sometimes with them. They're kind of like Dallas for me, where I feel guilty that I don't enjoy the peaks of it enough. And it's for different reasons.
Harden?
It's the playoff resume stuff with the Phillies' two main guys, and then for Dallas, I'm just not a huge fan of, as great as he is. Like, I don't think anyone has an easier time getting a bucket than Luka. Like, if you need a bucket in today's game, do you pick anyone over Luka?
Probably not right now. No.
Right?
His ability to create shots from anywhere on the floor.
Yeah. So here I'm giving him the ultimate compliment. But then when I think about, watching them and when they have good runs and they turn their defense around yesterday and they make it to the Western Conference Finals, like, I've already been over this before. It's just that you and I haven't talked about it. Like, it's almost more guilt when I watch them where I just go, okay. Like, I got it. And with Philly, like, Harden goes on this incredible tear. They win games with some of those other dudes out. They're keeping pace somewhat at the top of the East. And it has more to do with, the other teams being really good here. But with Philly, it's just, it would have to be like pristine for the regular season and for me to not go like, okay, well, we'll see what happens. Not to say it's impossible, but no, I'll watch them. I'll be like, hey, this is really good. It's fun, but I don't know. Maybe I should stop watching the regular season with so much emphasis on what I think it means the playoffs.
Well, I mean, how much does depth matter here with what we're talking about? Because, it seems like some of your concerns with Philly and Dallas are related to everybody else around Embiid and Harden and Maxey for Philly, and then everybody around Luka on the Dallas side of things. Like Grant Williams, he's the seventh best player on the Celtics. He'd be the third best player on the Mavs behind Christian Wood and Luka. Like, it's not even close.
I like Philly's depth a lot more than I like Dallas's depth. I don't think that's a
same for sure.
Right. Okay. In the West, if everybody were healthy, who would you actually like the most?
The Warriors. They can still spread out Jokic with 5 out in the postseason when they need to with that Denver roster. If the Warriors are totally healthy, I'm still going with them over everybody else. But Ryan, I think with Denver, people talk about some of the concerns on the defense. Everything I just said there, spread them out, 5 out, pull out Jokic away from the paint, space them out. The one hesitation I have there with Denver is the fact that they have a lot of big defenders. Like Michael Porter Jr. is not a great stopper, but he's 6'10". Aaron Gordon, Bruce Brown, they have a lot of size that they haven't had in past years. KCP, they can surround Jokic with a lot of big wing defenders who can provide help and still offer some interior rim protection. That's where I think the difference is with Denver this year compared to some past years. With that said, though, the Warriors still can tap into an elite level. Like their 5-man lineup, their starting lineup is still one of the best in all of basketball. They just have to figure out some of those configurations at the wing spot. Maybe they need a move to help plug that hole. But I think when the Warriors go down to their 8-man playoff rotation, they're still the best in the West.
I think I like New Orleans the best.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Now you're talking my language though, Ryan. I said before the season they can make the play. They can make the finals. Not that they will, that they can.
NBA finals?
The NBA finals, the Pelicans. And I said they can, not that they will. And the reason why I wouldn't say they will is because of the inexperience, but also the health. Like everything you just said about Boston being the best bet, doesn't that make New Orleans one of the worst bets, considering, Zion and Ingram can't stay on the floor?
Yeah, they're probably the worst bet. But, Denver, fairly clean bill of health, other than the Michael Porter Jr. part where he'll be hurt again. But Murray definitely looks way better now.
Yeah.
Which is to be expected. Memphis has their own issues with maybe their top 2 guys. But I think with Ja, it's just always, I'm afraid it's going to happen. Not just because he missed time last year.
The way he plays, scary.
Right. And then the Pelicans, they're the worst bet out of all of it. I mean, Dallas is missing Finney Smith, and Kleber's going to miss some time, continue to miss time. They keep putting Josh Green in the update because he was one of the rotation guys. But I don't know if that means a ton. Sacramento's a better health bet. Even with Sabonis in this hand situation, there hasn't been much drop off. Clippers are the worst health bet. They're probably worse than the Pelicans. Phoenix is a mess. Golden State's had their issues. Minnesota's missing their second best player. And then, on and on and on. I mean, Portland's actually kind of relatively healthy for them right now. So I know this isn't exactly new, but I mean, it kind of gets back to the first part of the whole Boston thing where you're going through this. Like, I like what New Orleans is, but it's a worse bet than Denver to expect to know what you're going to get once April starts up. Like, there's no way I could be like, hey, it's New Orleans, it's everybody else, or hey, they're the favorites, because they're still more unknown despite some of my concerns about, like, sometimes I'll look at the Denver conversation and we'll look at the wins, I'll look at the 1 seed, and you're like, all right, but is this really who they're not a team that anybody's afraid of, right?
They should be. I mean, Jokic could be a 3-time MVP, and he has a better supporting cast than he's had in past years. They should be feared. But I think, to your point with New Orleans, they're a team that should be feared if come April, Ingram and Zion are out there healthy, because they have the top end star talent. Like, they're almost kind of the West version, like a younger, inexperienced version of Boston. They have the top end talent, but they also have the depth too. I mean, like, Dyson Daniels as a rookie is already one of the better, guard wing defenders in the league. Trey Murphy, that dude is a nasty shooter. He has a really good connection with Zion in the half court as well with some of their 2-man game stuff. They have lineup versatility. They can play big with Jonas Valanciunas. They can play small with Larry Nance, Zion front courts. Like, they have all these different ways that they can play and match up against different teams. So I think that's what you need. When we talk about playoff basketball, we talk all the time about switchability and versatility from an individual player standpoint, but that's also true from a coaching standpoint when it comes to the types of lineups that you can put out there on the floor. That's the benefit Boston has had. You can put out Al Horford and Rob Williams, or you can just throw out Horford, or you can play small. That's what Golden State has tried to have, with one big out there with Looney and Draymond, or just Draymond when they really want to go small. And New Orleans has that too, as long as Zion is healthy. So, I mean, even the Clippers, that's why people hang on to the Clippers. Like last night, they win their game against Dallas going small. Zubats played 16 minutes. They went with all wing lineups, and they defended Christian Wood with, Marcus Morris, Covington, man throughout the entire game, and it worked.
I'm having a hard time with the Clippers thing. Like, how many
Me
years
too.
Are you going to go, oh, well, if they're healthy, if they were to do this, I mean,
can't trust them.
Yeah. Like, there's still more trust with chronically injured teams that I would have, way more so than the Clippers. Like, I can't write them off in January, but like, I get sick of people telling me how it's like, man, if they're healthy and they're right, like, look out. Like, I don't know, even with those 2 guys, it's not some guarantee.
Where are you at with Kawhi? I mean, like, he's putting up numbers lately, but I still don't feel like he has the same burst and like that explosiveness we saw in that Utah series a couple of years ago. Like, he doesn't, like, he's putting up numbers, but it just doesn't feel the same to me. Even last night,
I thought he was going to put up numbers if he was slower. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't. I wasn't shocked to see him put up numbers and look slower, but I agree with you. He's looked slower. I think he gets taken defensively way more than people ever attributed to him. Like, to me, the defensive part of him is way more reputation than what I really see at times. But because of his handle and his size and the way he's able to create space and the way he's able to shoot once he creates it, like, I expected him to, even a slower version of him, to be able to put up really big numbers. But even in this recent stretch, they get the win last night, but they played pretty poorly for 2 weeks, and that's with him back for 5 of the 7 games or 4 of the 7 games. So, and then even they get blasted by Denver, blasted by him, and those 2 guys were playing, and then you're like, oh wait, since they only played so many minutes, are they going to play him tomorrow night? And you're like, nope, and they don't play the next night. So, I guess I'm not trying to be a dick about it with the Clippers. I'm just sick of hearing about it.
It's just hard to trust that team. And I think those games you're talking about last week, they get destroyed on Thursday night play. I think Paul George and Kawhi played a combined 33 minutes and not playing the next night. It's games like that where you want to bounce back. And I mean, sure, you beat Dallas last night going small. Ty Lue pulls out the all-wing lineup even without Paul George, and like that's probably the formula for them in a lot of postseason series. But Friday, I believe they face Denver. Like those are the real tests, more so than Dallas and their lack of depth.
Yeah, it was interesting too during that Denver broadcast where Reggie Miller was saying that Ty Lue was basically expressing frustration that it's coaching with cue cards, where I thought, wait, that's kind of revealing. And I'd imagine everybody's frustrated. Like, I don't think anybody with the Clippers would listen to this and say any of this stuff is unfair, but they get this benefit of the doubt deal where, all right, I kind of get it, but
why do they get that benefit of the doubt, you think?
And I think it leads back to kind of the beginning of the year too. Like, I'll never forget, there was the offseason where Ainge got Gordon Hayward and Kyrie. Oklahoma City got Paul George, but then at the very end, they got Melo. But at that point, the Melo thing was going to kind of mess him up more than it was going to help him. And then they moved on from that real quick. Remember that? And they did the GM poll, and they went through it, and they were like, who had the best offseason? Which GM had the best offseason? And Oklahoma City actually won it. And I thought, wait, Boston gets Kyrie and Gordon Hayward, and because the Melo thing happened more recently in combination with the Paul George thing, it was like a landslide that Presti won it. And I went, man, this is weird. And I feel like the same thing happened to a lesser extent with the Clippers with the John Wall deal. Like, it's, oh shit, they had a John Wall. Like, that guy was the number one pick. And you're like, I expect something from him. Okay. I think a lot of teams would like to have him in the rotation, but it doesn't change the course of who you are. And then it was, they're the deepest team. It's like, they're definitely not the deepest team. Even when they are healthy, they are not as deep as New Orleans. It's not even a debate.
They're probably deeper with okay talent, but not with like playoff rotation talent, which is the difference between New Orleans and the Clippers right now.
And Boston. Probably Boston too.
No doubt about it. I mean, that's kind of the thing with the Clippers. They have options on the bench. I mean, like, Luke Kennard, John Wall, these guys are solid players. But I don't think they're at the level of some of the other talent we're talking about on these other teams.
No, I don't. I guess maybe it's just my own personal frustration with them as a storyline.